And last but not least, it's time for the Bible quiz.
Oh boy, the chance to plumb the depths of my lack of knowledge.
This week, I did double check. It is in the Torah. I will not mislead you.
Ah, thank goodness.
Okay. If two men fight together, and the wife of one draws near to the rescue of her husband from the hand of the one attacking him, and puts out her hand and seizes him by the genitals, then you shall cut off her hand. Your eye shall not pity her.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yes. Yes. Where is this exactly? My memory is that this is in this section of the Torah that's right after the Ten Commandments in the book of Exodus. You're not giving it. I'm wrong already?
You're wrong already.
Oh my goodness. Okay, how about Leviticus? Is that better?
Nope.
All right, then I'm gonna have to go with Deuteronomy.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Third time's the charm.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I'm not doing well here. One of the things they're talking about here is, it is all about liability in American law today, and who is responsible. And in this case, it's about intervention. And right, they're really saying, okay, going below the belt, even in a very desperate situation, is not okay, and that turns the person who, right, the idea here is that this woman was trying to stop the fight and trying to save her husband, and she becomes the one who's punished.
Yes.
Right. So it's I think you have to think about it about how much they valued reproduction, and their idea that any threat to that was an existential threat, to understand why they would make such a ruling. I don't think it's about the idea that somehow lewd behavior or something, right? I think it's really about the idea that it's kind of like where they say, also in Deuteronomy, I think, where they say that if you're besieging a city and it's a war, you're trying to kill all the inhabitants, and there's trees, and you want to cut down the trees to build your siege works, you can't cut down the fruit trees. Right? Because those are things that give life, and that's a long-term thing. And so your immediate thing of wanting to wage war against these people is not as important as the long-term effects of cutting off the fruit. So that, I think, is what they're thinking of here, is that, sure, a fight is bad. This woman wants to protect her husband, and yet if it's at the cost of cutting off the reproductive fruit of the people, then you can't do it. Strangely, I know you'll be surprised, it's not one that gets a lot of play in later rabbinic literature or in the modern world. People don't talk about that one so much.
Cut off a lot of women's hands.
Yeah, I don't think that really would be happening so much. And so many things in the Torah that the rabbis didn't like, they found sort of upsetting to themselves. They did one of two things. One thing they did was to go into it really extensively, look at each word, and find ways to negate it within the words that were there in the Torah. Another way is to ignore it. And I believe this falls mostly in that latter category. You don't hear a lot about it. There's not a lot of midrash about it. It's kind of like one of those things where like, yeah, sure. As we know, it's that thing that when people point at Scripture and say, happens in every religion. People point at Scripture and say, "Your Scripture says X," and you're like, "Yeah, okay. What does your Scripture say?" And so this is the thing where sometimes Jews will talk to Muslims and say, "Well, in the Quran it says this offensive thing," and Muslims are like, "Yeah, let's look at the Torah a little bit." Every tradition has these things that we're carrying, ancient traditions that we're carrying, and that we have to certainly confront. Uh, and in general, the Jewish attitude is we do confront it. Like, it's not, we read through the entire Torah every year. We don't skip that part. So we do have to wrestle with it. And I think the serious thing about it is to, of course, remember that while that particular punishment might not have been imposed even in ancient times, and certainly not in medieval or modern times, poor treatment of women certainly was, part of all societies, and the idea that women might be punished harshly for intruding into male matters and like taking a step that men thought was not appropriate. Well, that certainly was something we have to be aware of and guard against, right? So I always think that there are the parts of the Torah that remind us of all the wonderful and highest things in our lives that we want to strive for, and then there's the ones that remind us of the things we have to be on guard against. And the Torah itself does not distinguish. Right? It doesn't say, and here's the things that you shouldn't do. Here's a negative example. Here's a positive example. No, it just lays it all out there, and it's for us in every generation to try to figure out, what are we going to take from this, and how can we use it all, right? The rabbis say that the Torah should be compared to a fig, because you can eat the whole thing. So in other words, every part of it is useful for something. And they knew there's lots of parts of it that are upsetting, negative, seem completely outmoded, have to do with sacrifice. We don't do that anymore. But they said you can do something with all of it, and it's just a question of what are we going to do with it.
Probably not cutting off hands.
That we're not going to do.